Hey everyone, I'm going to skip mine. I'm not as awesome as our panelists today. So we'll start with George Finney, CISO SMU. I'm going to have him walk on over here. He's also brought, as I've seen, a few prizes today. It's going to be some of his books. So George, welcome. Thank you for coming out to help us. After George, we've got Scott Miller. He's with Health Management Systems, and he's a VP CISO. And Scott, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Joshua Danielson at Copart, Head of Information Security. Joshua, thank you. We have our own Elliot Franklin, who's with Omni Hotels, and he's the VP of Info Security. And last, I just met Roy Benny, who's with NextBank Benet, and he is with NextBank and Director of Information Security. So what I'm going to do is hand the microphone over, let everybody do a quick, maybe 1-minute introduction, and we'll get started.
Thanks for that great introduction. I'm George Finney, everyone. The Chief Security Officer for Southern Methodist University. I've actually been with the university for 14 years now, so it is a really awesome place to be. I actually got my law degree from SMU after I started. They mentioned there'll be a raffle of the book at the end, so I'm turning 40 next month, so my hope is to be able to get 40 reviews on Amazon. So if you do win, please check it out. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Miller, and thanks for having me here. I haven't been to an ISSA meeting in a very long time. I'm actually from Connecticut, and I was the Vice President of the ISSA and Chief Technology Officer of the ISSA in Connecticut. So it's good to be back here with some of my peeps. There are people in the audience that I see that I work with on a daily basis, and I'm happy to see those faces and appreciating you having me here again.
Josh Danielson, Head of Information Security with Copart. A bit of a shameless plug, as I'm sure everyone else here. We are hiring across all business verticals from AppSec over to infrastructure. So if there's anything else that piques your interest or even happen to be in the industry or market, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, sir.
Hey guys, Roy Benet from NextBank. I'm the IT Director in the ISO there. Just former military and got out and decided IT was kind of a way to go. It's a couple of my friends were doing it, and it's like, hey, it makes money, so okay. We had we went through. I did four tours in Iraq and several others that were not well known, and we did a lot of. There's a little bit of PTSD there, as you guys can imagine. So I did as a therapeutic thing. I went to culinary school and. Went through, managed to cook in 3 different countries, and that's between IT and culinary, I think the passions are kind of intermingled, and security is pretty interesting between both of those. So, but yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate being here.
My name is Elliot Franklin. I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure and Security for Omni Hotels and Resorts. And so I've been in the DFW area about almost 2 years, relocated from San Antonio. And prior to that was Head of Information Security for Whataburger Restaurants, and also did some time in healthcare. So I've done higher ed, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, and now hospitality. And of course, security is security, I think, and regardless of industry, but interested to share with the panel and with the audience.
All right. So in the extremely unlikely event, we do not use all of our time, and we run through our 4 questions. I'll bring the microphone to you, raise your hand, and we'll do some additional audience questions at the end. So the first question I have, and we can start maybe with Elliot and work our way back, but the first question I have is, if you can share a lesson that you've learned from a risk that was actually mitigated before it was exploited. So I think this has been a super fun week for most people in incident response. You're here, so that's a good sign. So we'll go ahead and start with Elliot, and we'll work our way down the line.
Yeah, well, I'll share, won't be related to this week's activities, but I think for me it was more of from a backup and recovery standpoint, which certainly could have been a result of the WannaCry. But, coming into an organization and assessing the backups and testing the backup solutions and seeing 4 different backup solutions across the organization, only backing up certain select servers and things, and so getting ahead of that, remediating that before it was exploited or before we needed to do a backup of something that we didn't have a backup of or restore. For me, that was key, and so being about 80+% virtualized, like I assume most everyone is, selecting a new backup solution that kind of focuses on the virtual side of things and can also handle the physicals, and converting off of 4 different backup solutions into a centralized solution and backing up everything. I don't care what it is. I'm backing up everything now instead of just quote critical servers, because what's critical to me is not critical to accounting and different departments. So for me, that was the example I'll share.
One of the things that I can, you can take into account pretty much everything, servers, and all the other things. But one thing a lot of people fail to take into account is users, your first line of defense. So one of the attacks that I mitigated was a crypto virus that had nailed one of our companies I used to work for. We had that hit, and we were able to stop it before it got anywhere because of the stuff we had in place. Virtual environment, so you can pretty much cut it off. But yeah, it's user education. Again, it's you'll hear me say that a few more times today. But it's a big thing near and dear to me. You can hire all the IT talent, and those are the guys you hire that know what to do, right? But the ones who don't are you're pretty much, I think, the biggest threat that anybody can mitigate before anything happens.
Sure.
So I've been in security for a long time, and I ran global security for Alcon Laboratories, which is now acquired by Novartis. And if any of you remember MS-09-065, which was Configure, we avoided the Configure worm, virus, whatever you want to call it, the destruction that was going to, kill everything in your environment. We were using Tipping Point at the time, and we were able to avoid that from spreading throughout our global environment. We were in 78 different countries and 140 different locations at Alcon. So having these intrusion prevention points at all of these different locations and covering all of our WAN environment was one of the ways that we helped avoid this, because it was able to identify it and help us avoid it. Now, it was still a very long struggle, because we had to make sure that everything in the environment was patched. We couldn't just rely on the IPS, but we were still able to avoid being infected by it, because we saw it hitting the gateways on all different parts of our network on the outside, trying to get its way in.
I think one of the things you have to remember is not to be chicken little. So if you're always saying the sky is falling, people will start to lose interest and not trust you. So I think building that trust over a long period of time and learning how to talk to your IT folks about patching is really important. And I actually had a really nice weekend with the WannaCry outbreak, because we only had 12 machines, desktops out of 6,000 that on our campus that were fully patched. So they happen to be just a handful of Vista machines that, for some reason, we still have Vista. But I think I attribute that to the success we've had with building trust and connecting with our server team and our desktops folks.
Sure. Everybody hearing okay? Back room? Great. So the second question's, what is a top security concern in your vertical this year, and what effective plans do you have to tackle those?
I'll go first again. Does it matter? Just musical mics. So for me, it's education. And when I mean education, I'm not talking necessarily security awareness education. I'm talking more of education within my business peers and partners, similar to that relationship part. For me, that's the biggest concern is, how can we prove value in what we do to our peers? I won't say partners or the business, because we're obviously part of the business. But how do we, in every meeting that we're in, address that elephant in the room right away? Whatever the discussion is, how do we bring up security and how we can help with the solution rather than be a roadblock. I know it's easy to say, but oftentimes we really can. We can help. If we can't get the basics right, the patching and other things, it's probably because of that education. We haven't educated those executives on the value to the organization and the risks, more of risk management of what not to do. So for me, it's education.
I'll probably take a little bit of a different take and maybe say people. I think everyone in industry right now is actually struggling to find the right resources at the right times. Coming from the retail industry and vertical, that's probably a little bit more of a challenge, particularly as we have more and more folks in skyrocketing compensation packages. I mean, I think Facebook and Microsoft now are offering signing bonuses for around $50,000 to $70,000 or so. I mean, in the retail space, we just can't compete with those types of things. So we try and be a little bit more creative in some other areas. So for example, we're taking a big approach to open source. So for example, GitHub. We're creating an in-house tool, GitHub Guardian. We're giving folks an opportunity to actually participate in those types of projects, and that really gives them the opportunity to put their name out there and make a brand for themselves. That's something at a Microsoft or any other large organization, you may not have that opportunity, right? They're a little bit more inward-looking in that kind of realm. So there's some pros and cons. Compensation is maybe an area we can't compensate when it comes to people, but we try and be a little bit more creative in some other areas. But all the things, patching, education, and whatnot, if you have the right people in a lot of cases, you can solve these types of problems. So that's probably been one of our biggest points of emphasis in the coming year.
So I know budgets really aren't that popular to talk about, but being a private institution, SMU doesn't have the kind of challenges that our public peers do. But when you look at like the Indiana state system or the Illinois state systems that haven't been able to pass a budget, so the schools, the whole systems are dealing with maybe 20 to 50% of their annual budget, and they're having to figure out what services to get rid of. I think that's going to be a really big challenge in higher ed to stay ahead of the curve and to keep their levels of service up while they're just getting rid of wholesale entire suites of services that they're offering. I have a big concern about higher ed and being able to be secure for the long term.
Okay, third question. How do you find the middle ground when you're balancing security risks and adopting the new disruptive technologies that are being brought into your environment? So we'll start. Roy? Great.
So I find IT being a director and an ISO, I kind of get both worlds, right? So with users, a lot of the times you get both worlds with IT and ISO. So I'm director IT, but I'm also ISO. So you get kind of intermingling of both worlds. So it's an arms race, right? Between IT, who just wants to secure everything, and users who just want to use their computers. So one of the things that, a lot of the technologies that come out, I don't know how many of you guys have heard, but, the auditors and regulators for financial and for HIPAA and all the different organizations are going to 14-character passwords. That's what they, which in my opinion, it just invites more security breaches because people are going to start writing them down because they can't remember them. So so it's just going to bring about a lot of things. So we're looking at things like multi-factor authentication, so thumbprint readers, for the local users instead of them, so then they can have whatever passwords they want. We have multi-factor authentication coming in from the outside, but to bring that inside, it's going to be a new concept. But, IT perception and security often don't run hand in hand. So you really have to kind of juggle the user perception as well as just concentrate on and focus on keeping things secure as well. But so we started an initiative. The way we juggle it is we started an initiative called Empower Users. So one of the things that we do is we send out a member of my team. They reach out to everybody in our departments, at our branches, at our locations. One person is assigned a certain crew, and they get familiar with them. What is IT doing? What struggles do you guys face? What are we not doing? What are we not doing that we can do differently? What do you guys face on a day-to-day basis that's a frustration? How do we balance that with our security? We meet as a team and we decide how to, the thumbprint reader was a direct result of those things. So we're FDIC, so like it or not, we're going to 14-character passwords, because of our regulators. So we have FDIC, Fed, Crow, all those guys are just, that's what they want. So, instead of doing that, in lieu of doing that, we'll go to a 14-character password, but we'll have some kind of multi-factor authentication internally. So it's just that's kind of how we juggle technology with the struggles of security. We have very antiquated vendors. We are, Jack Henry is one of our vendors, and they're very Internet Explorer dependent. So you can't patch above a certain build or above a certain thing, so it makes it very difficult to protect those things. So you end up going to, you end up letting your vendors manage you. It's kind of a struggle, a lot of times, especially in the financial world. And one of the ways we juggle that is just by really staying in touch with our users and making sure that those guys know, where we're coming from and kind of help them prepare for changes. We don't just implement them, we have to introduce them. And we start doing that months ahead of time. And to be honest with you, 98% of them are very receptive to that. We have no problems implementing things of a more secure nature as long as it's not a dead change like, Office 2010 to 2016, you know what I mean? So as long as it's nothing crazy like that, then they are pretty receptive to it. So I find it is juggleable, even though it can be difficult at times.
No, go ahead.
Just I guess real quick, everyone always says the same thing of start with the business first and think about your users first and whatnot, and that's definitely useful context. But one of the first things when I joined Copart is taking my CTO's goals and mapping them directly downstream to ours. So for example, my CTO's first goal is keep the lights on. Availability, right? So hence, as I was building out security strategy and goals and mission statements and otherwise, our first goal was keep auctions running. We're a car company, e-commerce and otherwise. So ensuring that when you come to the table for a type of purchase or type of new process or whatever it may be, being able to map those items to your goals, which directly map to your CTO goals, which he mapped to our CEO goals, makes the conversation go a lot easier. So anytime I'm actually opening up a budgetary type of conversation is an ask for anything, I always start off with those types of goals. What are you actually asking for? What happens if we don't do this? And mapping that directly upwards the entire chain. So it doesn't matter if I'm talking to my CTO, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to the CEO. It maps and it's an easy conversation across the board, opposed to just implementing something like two-factor authentication, which is telling us it makes us more secure. That's not really helpful context, but telling how and why and something that resonates with them really makes things a lot easier.
So when we're adopting new technology in our company, the first thing we do is actually ask the team that is planning on implementing it how they feel about it, how they feel about adopting it, how they feel that it's going to protect us, and how they're going to actually be able to measure the protection. And so there are people in this room right now who have been part of our bi-monthly security reports that we churn out every 2 months. They go to the executive staff and we explain to them what we have in place, what has been working, why it has been working, and then we evaluate whether or not there is effectiveness of that control. And so when we look through each one of the layers of protection that any of the issues that we're dealing with have gone through, we measure that and then we see whether or not it is still relevant and it is still current. And then we look to see if there is something out there that is better, that is new and improved, or if we have that same capability and something else that we already have in place. So rather than going out and buying the latest and greatest thing, we can look at RASP, right? Runtime application, self-protection. You can look at UBA or, whether it's user behavior analysis, network behavior analysis, whether you're using SIX and TAXI and Cybox, I don't really care. Take your acronym, take your technology, whatever. If you can't really focus on the products that you already have in place and implement those things and use more than the 10% that most of us tend to use when we buy a product, then the latest and greatest thing is not really going to help you. You've got to be effective with the controls that you have in place right now and not keep buying new ones.
So I would say higher ed is actually a lot of fun because unlike a lot of our corporate friends, we're able to experiment a lot more. And the way that we balance that is we do a lot of pilots. So we'll take a small group of users and we'll introduce a new technology or a new system or way of doing things, and we'll sit down with them and we'll ask them, hey, how did that work for you? And is this something that would fit into your department or your line of business? but we use their expertise, right? We've got a lot of PhDs or other really smart people that have really good ideas that we've been able to bring back and work into our program. So one of my passions is being able to evolve security awareness into something that is more effective and more meaningful. And the way you get more effective is you need a way of measuring whether the training or whatever you're providing is doing. And I think the light went off for me with some of our simulated phishing. With the way we were able to show click-through rates going down over time really resonated with people. And so I want to be able to do that in other areas. So I actually partnered with our assessments guru inside our provost office to create kind of a survey to kind of measure things. And we're going to do that year over year to see whether what we're actually offering people actually is delivering the outcomes that we want to see. But it's that ability to kind of pilot things and do quick kind of agile methods to figure out whether the technologies we're trying to deploy really meet the needs of the university. I think that's been really fun, and we're kind of an early adopter in a lot of technologies because of it.
Good. I will reiterate absolutely what Scott said. Leveraging what you've got before you go buy something new is a fantastic approach. The other thing I'd bring up is just before we were meeting, the amount of insight you can gain from your peers. I mean, I think you guys are here for a reason. In these groups, you learn a lot from each other. So absolutely leveraging that first. So the next question is, as far as advice to our audience, what is something you'd spend or you suggest spending just 5 minutes a day learning about or sharing with your users or your colleagues to improve security hygiene? Start?
Sure. Yeah, I think it goes back to a lot of what's been mentioned is if 5 minutes a day spending with your users, go out and visit with your users. I love that part of my day. Because I want to know how we're preventing them. I go out and visit the different properties, the different hotels, and I see how we as IT and we as security are preventing them from doing their job, preventing them from generating revenue. And actually, how can we change that? So you talk about disruptive. I mean, every industry is going to be disrupted. Uber and Netflix and these other disruptions. I mean, our industry is going to be disrupted, and it'd be great if we could be the one that would invent that disruption ourselves and disrupt ourselves. And so how can we automate and how can we help them from a security standpoint? If it's MFA, if it's something like that, they can help them have an easy password or never have to change their password, right? From what I understand, NIST just came out and said you don't have to do 90-day password changes. Great, because they're useless. And so if you can do MFA, well, how can I help that front desk agent that's trying to check in 300 guests in the line and they forget their password? Is that really protecting their credit card data? No. So I think it's getting out and visiting with our users and trying to solve their problems, be proactive in solving their problems. And it may not be a security issue, but it's a technology issue that we can kind of coordinate from the security angle.
Also, your IT talent, the people you hire on your teams, the people that, the people that you spend time with every day. I mean, the people that you hire to get your IT perception to a level where people trust you, to where users put their trust in you. I mean, your team is being former military, team is a huge concept to me. And my team is always, I do everything first and foremost for my team. So secondary team would be my users, right? So as far as IT and IS, your customers are more internal than they are external for finance, especially financial. So one of the things, I spend 5 minutes a day at least with my team, just saying, what do you love coming to work every day? What could improve? What can we change? What ideas do you have? What reading have you guys done? What can we incorporate in our everyday thing? The second tier to that is user communication, just to echo what he said. I mean, just spending 5 minutes, even a week, with your users, they appreciate it. And when things, like you said, things are disrupted, things are going to be disrupted. Servers go down, 99.999% uptime is still not 100. So things are going to get disrupted. But if users trust you, if you have a good relationship and a good communication base with your users and your team, you recover, and IT perception recovers a lot faster, I think.
I would say learning continuing to learn the organization so you can have more meaningful, more rich conversations. So, for example, I still encourage everyone on my team to actually read, if you're a publicly traded company, to read your quarterly earnings reports. Hop onto those types of calls. At least look at those kind of things, take a step back and look at everything from a big picture. I mean, for me, it helps my conversations be a lot more rich and a lot more meaningful when I talk to our CFO of how this potential control that we're going to introduce can save 5 million EBITDA, right? Now you're speaking in their language, and they can have a more cognizant kind of decision on their plate instead of just asking again for another technical solution that they don't really understand in their terms. So learning those types of things can, again, turns back to the business and can help us on the other side.
So I think you're going to hear kind of a recurring theme here when you talk about the things that we should be doing, and it is spending time with people, right? I could not emphasize that enough. And in the teams of people that I influence every day, I've asked them to spend at least 3 lunches per year with someone outside of their organization. That's literally in their performance reviews, right? I don't care who pays for lunch. It's not my deal, because the relationship that they have with other people in the organization is going to come back and pay dividends far beyond any security awareness training we do, any technical control we put in place. And if you really think about it, right, you're going to tell people that you're comfortable with more information than those who are just nameless, faceless. You'll tell your aunt and your uncle something that you won't tell your parents because you're afraid to tell your parents. They're going to slap you, right? They're going to spank you. They're going to get you. Slap you on the wrist is what I meant. No capital punishment, right? But you will tell your aunt or your uncle or your cousin or your sister, your brother, because you feel comfortable telling them the things that you wouldn't tell your parents. So the more of you that have those conversations and have those relationships with people outside of your normal circle, the more that information will come back, and the better you'll be able to put controls in place that are actually effective as opposed to the things that you just think are effective.
That's great. I actually had a New Year's resolution a couple years ago to have a lunch with someone at the university that I'd never talked to before once a week for the whole year. And I think, thinking back through those, the last few years, that's really made a huge difference in my career and my ability to execute and build relationships. I would say, when I talk to my team, I would say communication is the number one thing that's going to define success for you in your career, whether it's at the university or whether it's at any place else you would go. Thinking about doing something as as unsecurity-like as Toastmasters or reading books and having like a book club, whether that's 7 Habits or Start with Why or The Power of Habit. Those kinds of things, start to give you a bridge to be able to relate to a lot of the business leaders that have done those same things. If I were to ask 5 minutes of time for the rest of my organization, I would say the point isn't to make the departmental managers or executives into security people. I don't want to have them be reading the blog about WannaCry and digesting how how that worked. But I do want them to know enough to be able to ask good questions of us. So once we've built those relationships, I want them coming to us to connect, to say, hey, is storing my password in LifeLock or KeyPass online or whatever it is that a good idea or not? Are those secure or not? Those are the kinds of questions I want to have. So getting them exposed to the universe of what's out there, I think is a good 5 minutes a day spent.
Actually, I just want to mention one more thing. It was supposed to be what you would spend 5 minutes on, right? Something that you're passionate about. I don't care what it is, but if you're in the security space, you're hopefully in the space for a reason, not because you were forced into it or because it's just something to do to get paid. Because there's a lot of different jobs to go do and get paid. Security is a pretty stressful job. If you could spend 5 minutes on something, let's say that you're working in policy or you're working in I don't know, standards, or you're working in incident management or whatever, if you have a passion about a particular area of security that is not normally your day job, spend 5 minutes on that thing that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about it, that 5 minutes will turn into 50 minutes because you want to do it, not because you have to do it. So the thing that you're passionate about, you'll do with your heart, and you'll spend more time on it. Spend that 5 minutes at least every day.
Okay, so that was the original 4 questions. I've got a couple backups. If you do have a question, I'd like you to go ahead and just raise your hand. I'll make my way over to you. We definitely heard that interacting with your folks and interacting with your people is extremely important. It's something you need to be doing. If you could raise your hand, I'm going to work my way from the furthest around. Actually, you 4 can just kind of pass it through. You know, I don't think any of us want Twitter to be our alert system, so it's nice to know those people before something breaks. So go ahead.
Artificial intelligence is going to be amazingly disruptive going forward. I believe one of the tools that's coming out is to take a look at your SIM or your logs and to pull out actionable items. Has anybody messed with any of these artificial intelligence solutions in the SIM logging space?
Yes.
Oh, and how effective was it?
So we're looking at different ways of leveraging the information that we already have in our SIMs right now. And if you can't hear me, let me know. We're looking at different ways of leveraging the information that we have in our SIM right now. It kind of goes back to the statement that I made earlier. As opposed to buying new products all the time, look at the information that you already have. Try to leverage that information that you currently have in your system, as opposed to putting another tool online and then trying to pull that information into yet another tool, yet another tool, yet another tool. I'd be willing to bet you that if you are a security person and you understood how to use any type of real business analytics system, any business intelligence system, you'd be able to derive a lot of the information, probably 80% of the information, out of your current logs that you would had you bought a SIM. So your SIMs have the intelligence built into it. They have specific rules built into it. And that's all awesome, right? Because you want to get up to speed, you want to get time to market really quickly, but you also could use different tools to leverage the information that you already have. The artificial intelligence products that are out there right now, and let's say that you are leveraging Watson for some reason to do some of that information gathering and analysis. Watson's really awesome because it's doing what you should be able to do through a fuzzy search, a fuzzy match search very quickly with natural language, as opposed to having to dig through it with specific query types, right? Using regex queries or whatever you're going to do. So there are some capabilities out there that are really good. The ones that we're trying to leverage are in using what we have coming out of our SIM right now, which is our logging and analysis center.
And just to add to that, another thing too is just to, you may have to have some developer conversations. If you have, leveraging what you have is not always, sometimes it's limited to the knowledge of what you have, right? So, but if you have if you spend 10, 15 minutes, even half an hour with the developer folks, they can, let them know what you want. A good vendor will do that. They'll listen to you. The answer is always yes, right? Just how much you want to pay for it. So, but yeah, it's spending some time with the developers is always recommended. We did that where I am. We have a firewall. When I first came to the bank, we have a firewall that nobody's ever heard of. So getting syslog data out of that firewall is very rough. It's very raw data. So we had to find a way to translate that data. So spending some time with the developer folks, like you said, leveraging what you have. Don't just go out and look for the next best thing. But a lot of times you'll find that these developers and these companies will work with you and build you a solution.
I'll mention one other thing in talking about not just artificial intelligence, but I was at a meeting yesterday talking about deception technologies and things like that. And I agree back to the same point of, okay, I've got a risk register at my company. I've got a risk score. How's that going to help reduce that risk score? Would it have stopped WannaCry? No. And so if I'm not doing the basics, if I haven't done, adopted a framework, NIST, ISSA, whatever framework, and if I've not accomplished the basic SANS Top 20, all these new technologies, AI, they're not going to help me. So that's my my opinion.
Great. So if you have a specific tool you're curious about, do you want me to say it? And people can come see you afterwards?
I was really more concerned about the effectiveness of AI in anybody.
In general, okay. Okay. Okay, so next question. I'm going to pass it here, and then we'll work our way around.
Thank you, gentlemen. The Wall Street Journal came out on Monday with an article about how CISOs are in demand. And we know that's the problem throughout industry, finding the right qualified security professionals that you need, to work with your organization. There were 9 items or 8 items that they had ranked in this article that came out. Number 1 was leadership. Number 2 was communication. Number 3 was executive relationships. 4, IT relationships, management, technical, compliance and legal. And the last was the business acronym, okay? Having business knowledge, you talked about EBITDA. What I haven't heard, and this would be the one I'd want to focus one of you on your questions, depending on your industry, there are regulatory controls, legal, compliance activities that are top of line every day with your activities. Which ones are those, and what are you doing about them, like using the cybersecurity framework or something? How are you addressing that?
Sure, I can start. Well, it's a great question, and I agree with that list. And in fact, that was one of our backup questions, was on regulations and how regulations will impact us. Again, my take is, for the most part, any of the ones that I'm aware of or I'm subject to, PCI or HIPAA or any of those, if you're following a framework, NIST, ISO 27000, if you're following one of those frameworks, it's going to cover those. And so I certainly don't want to build my security program to a compliance, because we know that that's baseline. So that's my opinion, is if we've got a solid framework and we've got buy-in for that framework, then we should be compliant with all of those. And then, except for like something like GDPR, which again, that's privacy on my standpoint, not security, but obviously closely aligned, and that's my opinion.
One of the things you asked specifically, one of the items mentioned on that list was executive relationships. I agree with that list 150%. I don't exactly agree with the order of that list. Exactly. So my executives come last, almost, to be honest with you, because they know when they hired me that my team comes first, that the things that we have to, one of a comment was made to me at one point by an executive, not where I work now, but somewhere else. It's like, you'll never get fired for having the Cadillac. Well, how do you know what the Cadillac is? That's what you have me for. So it's really, executive relationships are very important, but at the same time, your relationship with your users and your IT, from a compliance standpoint, compliance is Okay. Compliance is a requirement no matter where you are. Compliance is a requirement no matter what industry you're in. You have to have compliance anywhere you are. Financial, whether it's hospitality, whatever it may be, everybody's got compliance. The way you go about compliance is with the first thing you mentioned is leadership. Leadership, leveraging your team, doing the things that you can possibly, all the things that you do. The applications are really not relevant a lot of the times. An application is an application, right? Or, like you said, is one application going to prevent the WannaCry virus? No, it's not going to. But if you have a good team in place that's ready and knowledgeable, like business knowledge was another item on that list, right? So if you have a team in place that's knowledgeable in business, I think you cover all the bases of that list.
I mean, if it was as easy as just implementing a framework and everyone was good to go, then no one would get breached, right? In fact, no one here would actually be needed, because you just do the framework, right? So we all know here it's a little bit more complicated than that. So I think we kind of hit on multiple points, but I just want to kind of wrap up at least with that piece. It's an art, more of a science in some cases.
So higher ed is kind of at an intersection of a lot of weird regulations, right? So we've got FERPA, we've got a health center and student athletes, so that's also HIPAA, lots of different compliance. So, I rate that actually towards the bottom of our list, just because we've got a framework. We understand what our business needs are, and we try and do the best to kind of triangulate between Graham Leach Bliley and SOX and FERPA, and it's you know, it's never a perfect fit, but, you know, we try and prioritize security over compliance, and I think our executives understand that.
Okay, who's in the back? I'm going to go to start to the back real quick.
Back to the first question about artificial intelligence and leveraging what you already have. Are any of you considering hiring or bringing on board data scientists to start doing modeling of the data you already have and augmenting your security teams with those type of people?
Great question.
So I'll say no. I've got a small team, but I'll just plug SMU's got a really good data science program. So if you need any data scientists, I've got the hookup.
We're not looking at trying to hire data scientists because we're in a hybrid situation with our implementation of our SIM and our logging. So we have a third party that actually does the 24/7, 365 monitoring. When there is some specific type of queries that we want done, we'll actually go talk to them and we'll say, we want this, we're looking for this. If they can't give us the information, we'll tell them very specifically how to do it. And then if they still can't give us the information, we're going to our sourcing company, our VAR, of which one of the representatives happens to be here in the front row today, and we'll say, look, we're trying to get this done. These jackasses don't know how to do it. Give me somebody who you've talked to that knows how to get it done. And they will hook us up with somebody else who has a product that is, you know, amongst our brethren in here. And they'll say, here's how we did it. Then we'll go back to them and we'll say, you suck, do this. Right? So we'll keep our MSSP on their toes to let them know that we are looking for something that you couldn't get done and you definitely should have been able to do it because somebody else has done it already. But ultimately, we leverage them. So, the short answer is no, we're not hiring directly in, but it's because we rely on someone external to get it done for us.
Yeah, everyone can get in a debate of what's artificial intelligence versus machine learning, and everyone can geek out on that type of conversation. But the truth is, we've seen this past week, it's not the would AI have stopped this? I mean, maybe. But if you would just done the bare basics again, we would have been fine, right? In fact, if you do just do the basics, you're probably going to be covered from 80% of all the threats that are coming through to you right now. Is getting a data scientist really going to stop something like this? I mean, if you want to go to a new product and do that line, that could work too, right? But I think like most people here, if you just do the basics, you're going to be stopping all the WannaCries, most of the stuff that's actually coming through the front door right now. In fact, I think our assessment, we did one probably about a year or so ago when I came on board, most of the technologies, forgetting about cybersecurity, aren't really AI, they're really more along the lines of machine learning. In fact, as an industry as a whole, businesses and BI and whatnot are just starting to get the speed in that space too. So most folks claim the cyber and AI and whatnot, they're really not for the most part, at least that I've seen in the cyber security realm at least.
And you also have to ask yourself, at what point does artificial intelligence override actual intelligence? So I think that, you know, to your point, leveraging what you have again, right? Just, you know, holding their feet to the fire, they may not be your one-stop solution. But like I can't tell you how many vendor calls I've had with my vendors, my SIM and, you know, those guys and saying, hey, these guys can do this. And they say, well, that can't be done. Oh, really? Because these guys said they could do it for half the price, you know. So, and you tell them exactly what they can do and you make them work for you. I mean, people, customer service, you know, excellent customer service is, it's dead. You know, I mean, you're not going to be 150% happy with the vendor that you get. There's just no two ways about it, especially in information security. There's just no way to do that. A lot of these guys are cybersecurity companies coming out of the carpet weavings. I mean, they're just everywhere. So, they're a lot of the times you'll find them very arrogant, especially in the artificial intelligence area. You know, they think that they can do everything and do it all, and then they tell you, well, no, this can't be done. So, you know, you get another developer on the phone with them, and you say, hey, this can be done, and we can do it for a third of the price, and then all of a sudden their tune changes. You know, so so hiring outside to me is not always the best answer. It's actually being. It's again to this gentleman's point about the, you know, business knowledge. It's just knowing what you have and doing your research and really, you know, talking to like you guys are doing now. You guys are here learning, you know, about things. I'm sure a lot of you have talked to each other about what you do and who does what, and you know, and that's the best thing that you can do, in my opinion, is just educate.
I'll just add, if, my goodness, I can't imagine from a security standpoint, it's so hard to find security people and data scientists, it's even more difficult. But for me, if we were to hire a data scientist, it would be more from the business side more than security. Certainly we need to know a lot of our data mapping that we don't, that we can sell that data, leverage that data, use it to better market to our customers. But from a security standpoint, no. We're the same way. We use an MSSP to monitor our SIM 24/7.
Okay, back room, get ready. I'm walking across the hall. You guys have a break. So that whole question about the hiring a data scientist, personally, everything I have to give to management needs to be in Excel.
I came from the back room.
Oh, you came from the back room? Well, sorry guys, I'll be over there next.
Okay, the question that I have for the panel is, you were talking about compliance earlier, and I want to know, what is the majority of time that you spend on compliance versus security? Because what I find from my customers, they spend the year trying to comply with PCI, HIPAA, or whatever, and security is just a little add-on that they want to have a couple of controls that are above and beyond what they're doing already for compliance. And in some cases, whatever they do for compliance, that's what they consider security.
So security by compliance. Raring to go.
So I'll just say, I have a lot of very smart people with acronyms at the end of their names asking me questions, and the challenge for us has been, every time a standard comes out or a standard is updated or a framework comes out, they're like, well, how do you map to this? That's been a real challenge for us. So I will say I don't do any mapping, right? I'm not saying, okay, well, here's how I align with NIST, and that aligns with COBIT, and that aligns with the critical security controls, and that I don't have the staff to be able to just have a dedicated person just working on compliance frameworks. So what we've done is we've just picked one, and it's an older one, but I think it works with our environment. It incorporates the rest of what IT has embraced with ITIL, I would say, pick what works for you. Do it once, or do it every other year. Don't try and have it be a monthly thing where you try and keep up with every little change.
You asked a three-dimensional question, and there's no two-dimensional answer. Okay? You can't just meet a compliance framework and say I'm done. You can't just put the controls in place and say that I'm done. And you're only done as well as you can answer the audits. So first of all, I'm going to go back to the question that was asked in the front of the room. When you talk about the types of things that make a CISO an attractive individual, presentation skills and your ability to answer audits and actually understand the question behind the question. There's a book about that too. There's a question behind the question. Once you can get to the question behind the question and understand what your auditors are actually asking, you should be able to find ways to answer that, but you should not be spending year after year after year on those exact same controls. If you're spending year after year on the exact same controls, the controls aren't changing that much. They're really not. Okay? I've been in financial services, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, and now healthcare. And I've been across all of those things. And the one common thing is, when the auditors have confidence that the person who's answering the question actually knows what they're talking about, they tend to let their guard down a little bit, and they say, okay, I'm not going to ask the stupid questions. I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to run through the framework. You've asked and answered, great. Every year you should have that same information documented in an SOP, standard operating procedure. You should be able to refer to that SOP. That's part of your control requirements, your document requirements. If you're in manufacturing, it's part of your GDP. And then pull that out every single time. Your policy framework should be in some type of centralized location. We happen to use Archer in our company, okay? I'm not advocating Archer. We use Archer in our company. I've been in other companies where we haven't used Archer, and we still met our compliance regulations every single time. But you should not, year after year, have to spend an entire year on answering the same thing.
one of the main things I can say is not everything needs to be a policy. Okay. Policies and standards often get very confused. Procedural and policy documentation often gets crossed often. In our financial institution, and I'm sure others as well, policies are things that have to go to the board of directors for approval. Standards are procedural. You can change those anytime that you want to. If a regulator comes in and asks me, we have two types of examiners. We have an examiner who's like FDIC, Fed, then we have auditors, right? People who say, hey, this is out of whack, you need to do this to pass the exam. People who prepare you for the exams. So when regulators come in, one of the main things is one of the phrases I've gotten very familiar with in finance is show me the regulation. Show me where it says I have to do this. Show me where it says, because in all the years I've been doing this, auditors are always finding ways to make themselves relevant and to make names for themselves. It's a common thing. So when they come in and they say, well, you need to do this, we're going to recommend this, in your finding. Well, show me the regulation where that's a finding. Like you said, compliance is not a thing where you can just put in a set of controls and you're finished. You're never done with compliance. Even, in my opinion, one of the things that makes a CISO an attractive individual is not only presentation skills, but it's also the fact that and it's the realization that you're never done. You're never finished. You're always thinking of ways to improve your infrastructure. You're always thinking of ways to improve the security. You're always thinking of ways, you put in a set of controls, you please the regulators. Okay, but at the end of the day, it's not the regulators that are going to have to answer for non-compliance. It's going to be you. So one of the things that, I have a very military mentality about these things. I push back on regulators a lot. We have a compliance officer in our company, but she is the compliance officer for the entire bank. So everybody from mortgage to credit to everyone who has to do what they have to do, IT is just a small part of that. And well, that's what they think, right? So IT is actually a very large part. But as far as the compliance aspect goes, it's an always changing, ever changing realm of the industry. So to answer your question, short answer to your question is, compliance and security don't always go hand in hand.
I think there's really only maybe one thing I'll add to that, and that is, it sounds like if that's the case, that maybe those educational conversations haven't occurred at the board level, or maybe that they're focused on compliance at the board level. And so I know when I get the opportunity to present to the board, there's nothing magic, but maybe 3 slides at the most, and I focus on our risk. I don't care what it maps to, but what is our risk? And talk about a GRC. I use an open source GRC system, so it's free, right? But it does the job, and it maps those. So we have the policies or the procedures stored in there, and we go through it once, regardless, and then we can show the auditors that. But yeah, I think if we show I present a risk register at the board meetings, very very simple, 1 slide, and the company has agreed to go to a certain % of risk. Anything below that, I don't have to worry about. Anything above that's what I need to be addressing, what I need to be showing improvements on. But it's risk to the company, and if compliance is one of those, if we're not meeting a control because it's HIPAA or PCI or something, then that's going to show up on that risk register. But if all I'm focusing on is, yep, I'm PCI compliant for the year, every company that's been breached is PCI compliant, right? That doesn't work.
That's a good point.
Boom.
All right, so I keep hearing this over and over again that you guys are looking for good people. So shameless plug, right? So you have a resource of IT individuals like myself, but I found it quite difficult to actually break into security, right? Because you have these certifications that are saying you need to have 5 years of experience, or you have this degree that you can or possibly can't go to. At your level, how does that trickle down to your management to say, hey, we're looking for a path for professionals to get into security? Like how can we make this happen as an industry? Because I think there is a talent pool out of there, but I think there's also a heavy gate to get in.
Fake it till you make it is not an option, guys.
So that's definitely one of the hardest issues that I've had to contend with. And, after losing one of my most technical resources and taking 6 months to replace him and having to, pay $20,000, $30,000 to a recruiter to get a good fit in, I had kind of a wake-up call. So one of the main benefits of working at a university is you get free tuition. So shameless plug, it's a really good place to work. But it dawned on me, why am I asking for someone with a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree when I know there are really great, qualified candidates out there that maybe are halfway through a bachelor's degree that I could help get them the rest of the way, and they'd really, that would resonate with working for me. Same with certs. So after that 6-month cert, I dropped the requirement for a bachelor's degree. I dropped the requirement for a CISSP, and I probably interviewed 30 people, 40 people going through that process, and maybe one of them was, or two of them were even remotely qualified. After I dropped those requirements, I probably got 20 people that I had a hard time choosing between. So for me, the light went off. Hey, you know what? That's the main benefit. I'm going to pay to get you certs. I'm going to pay to get you a degree. So if mid-career, folks who want to slow down, maybe not travel, all of those things, helped me get forward, and I'd hope that some other folks have maybe similar experiences.
If you've ever seen the pie chart of how people actually get jobs, 40% of jobs are first level relationships. The other 40% of jobs, second level relationship. Only 20% of the jobs that people get are a result of a resume. So what you're doing here today, that's how you get your foot in the door.
It's hard to me kind of build off that point because that's really kind of it. I mean, doing those types of things are really kind of key. I'll probably share my hiring process and kind of show how I maybe game my own system. Usually when I'm hiring for a type of position, I'll look for 5 or so. If you're going over 5, you're going over too many characteristics in the person. It may be around communication, it might be around network, OS, or whatever type of technical skill. Based on that, I'll kind of categorize them, give a ranking score where I see the individuals lie. If it's something on the AppSec side of the house, for example, maybe you don't have AppSec experience per se, but you're on the development side of the house. Well, what kind of GitHub projects have you contributed towards? How have you maybe identified problems in past organizations and maybe tying that back to something that's on the job rec? So understanding what those kind of core requirements for the position are and maybe realizing some areas that you can compensate where maybe you haven't done the job directly is probably one of the areas I would focus on first, because there's opportunities across the board. If you don't see any, you probably haven't taken advantage of them in your current position right there, because there's plenty of things you can probably map towards.
Well, in my opinion, I was in the same boat. Quite a while back, when I first got out of the military, anybody who's been there, especially in combat, will tell you that the transition is very hard into civilian life. When you go, one of the things I had that I will never ever forget was an amazing mentor. I had someone who, in a leadership position, was everything that I ever wanted to be. So leadership is a big part of that for me. I have my intern who is here today as my guest. He is somebody that I trust and believe in. He's only been with us for about 4 months, but he's a manager. He's young, and he is a future CISO, I guarantee you. I think part of the responsibility also falls on leadership. It's not just the people. It's also for leaders to really look into your people, because they're the people who make you who you are. They're the people who make you look good every day. They're the people who rely on you for everything. And I don't think it's too much to ask to pay them back by encouraging them, getting them the certifications, doing the continuing education. That was a condition of my employment, is that I could get my team continuing education certifications. The team that did not have that, because I am a very street smart individual, but I wasn't cert smart. So I had a mentor who empowered me to get those certs, and who paid for those, and who helped me, and who nurtured me through every turn. So he became the leader I am today, and that is, at least in my opinion. And I think that some of the responsibility also falls on your leadership. So leadership has high expectations of their employees, but I think that you're selling yourself way short if you don't have high expectations of your leaders.
Yeah, and for me, it's always been looking internal and to the non, they're not security trained, but, other positions, the help desk, other, technicians, IT, or network and server guys, and building them up. It's similar. When you identify those candidates that you see going above and beyond, looking for some, that are geeking out and playing in other areas, bring it. So if you can get your foot in the door in an organization in a position that's not security, and then move there, that may be, depending on your experience, may be the best way.
So to Mr. Finney's point, fantastic. Low turnover, because you know when he's going to graduate. That's phenomenal. I know we had one over here. The other thing I'd say is, if you don't rub enough shoulders with people at lunch, volunteer. You guys wouldn't believe who I've met in the last 6 months. Director of CIA. Last week, or a few weeks ago, Dave Kennedy. If any of you guys watch, what's the show? The hacking show. The guy with the weird eyes. Mr. Robot. He wrote the tools on that show. I mean, phenomenal people you meet through these groups.
So a couple of, a kind of fun question, I guess. Given the events of this week, and I guess we can't ignore them, I've seen, shall we say on LinkedIn, the ambulance chasers all out there giving their advice, which happens to follow their particular bent on security. So one of my views is that almost as security people, we should be taking a Hippocratic oath and helping each other out rather than trying to make benefit from it. So that's kind of one of my passions for security as a business or as a discipline. What is your passion for security as a business or a discipline going forwards?
I think that's fantastic. If you guys followed the WannaCry thing this week, the reporters doxed the poor guy that shut down half the viruses. Fantastic. Make an example of that, but sorry.
So I'm not going to come right out and say I hate salespeople because Taylor's in the room, and I would never say that. So I mean I must have gotten 200 emails from sales folks in the last 5 days. So I don't think that there's the awareness on the sales folks side about how just creepy that comes off, right? If I mean. Honestly, so the first thing I would say is, unless you already have an existing relationship with me, don't come to me and brag about how you were the one company that discovered, or you were the first one that found it, or okay, great, that's cool, but gosh, that's not going to sit well with me, and I know that all of the rest of my IT friends that I work with are getting that same level of spam, and that's just not the way to do business. So I appreciate that question. For me, I think I said earlier, my passion is security awareness, and I think a lot of the things that we've talked about today kind of resonate with this, but we've gotten so good at technology, whether it's machine learning or whatever it is, we've essentially shrunk our security footprint down to where the main avenue that I think you can get into a company now is through its people. So if you're not doing more to help empower your people to be a part of the security conversation, I think you're failing. So that's my passion is kind of helping security to really be everyone's job, and I think that involves giving them the training or the tools or the advice to be a part of that, however large or small that part may be.
I understand Scott's got a schedule he's got to keep to, so any last words? And I definitely want to give him a thank you on the way out.
It's a passion. The stuff we do is really cool. The things we get to touch is really cool. The things we're responsible for looking at is really cool. I mean, you can go to a lot of different jobs, but when do you get to touch so many things across the entire organization? It's a cool thing to do. So it's passion.
No, thank you, Scott. I guess to your point, in the interest of giving back to community, I'll probably tailor something for the sales folks, I guess. Most of my phone calls, I get blasted from about 9 o'clock to maybe about 5 o'clock p.m., right? I would encourage any sales folks, and I might regret this, to the exact opposite. I'm in the office from around 7 o'clock to maybe 6 o'clock. If you call on the tail beginning or the tail end of that, when you can get past the admin assistants that are already in the office, that's probably, if you're going to do cold calls, that's the way I would do. I'm probably going to regret that, but.
My passion with security is just stuff we're doing here, making everyone a part of it, learning from people and teaching people. And I think that one of the things that I really enjoy about security is it's just cool. I mean, there's, some of the things that we look into and the things that we are able to, when you're able to study, there's not quite the feeling, no matter how long you've been doing it, when you look at something and you prevented or you stopped, something that could have otherwise been really, really nasty. And you look at that and you're like, man, we did that. So it never stops being cool. So the passion, I would have to say, is that sharing that feeling, making my team a part of it, sending an email out to all my users and said, man, look what we stopped. All of us as a team, look what every one of you helped stop. You guys do your training. It's monotonous and it's stupid and it's boring and it's, but it's effective. So it's, it's one of those things. Just the passion is really, just like you said, awareness, just making everyone a part of it.
Yep. I echo the same thing, right? So, I mean, just love solving problems, and I think we can really help our business solve problems, and hopefully not prevent them from doing business. So, I echo that.
I think we're just about out of time. Clay, you're pointing at me. So, I know I had one or two other last questions, and I've gotten one via email here. So, I'm going to go with this one just so it's fair. Stress. You guys mentioned stress. What are the ways that you deal with the stress of your job and that are okay to say in a forum like this?
Wine, red wine. That's right.
Everybody give Scott a fantastic thank you for having him.
Yeah, I mean, events like this, are certainly great. We have a lot of this is a great community. There's a lot of security events here in DFW. I mean, obviously, it goes back to the point of what can you spend 5 minutes on that's your passion, right? That can help with it as well. I think for me, it's realizing that, A, I can't solve all the problems of the world, right? And neither can our teams. So we just, if we're spending time doing things we enjoy, certainly with family, outdoors, it's hard to break away and turn off your phone. And we try to find state parks and things where phone service doesn't work, and then you can't get a hold of us. So that's what I do.
I turned to culinary and competitive ballroom dancing. I mean, it's so people ask me all the time. It's like, well, how do you juggle everything? And somebody told me a long time ago, if you don't make time for health, you're going to have to make time for sickness. Yeah. It's one of the two, so you choose. So I choose to make time for health and drag my beautiful bride into it with me, and she's but you got to take the time. You got to take the 5-10 minutes a day to just look up at the sun and smile and just feel it, and don't forget what that feels like. I mean, take the time to actually just walk outside, get away from your desk, no matter how stressful work is at the time, it'll be there when you get back.
Yeah, I'd encourage everyone. Everyone is busy, no one has any time, but you have to be able to make time to actually pick up a hobby. I mean, a few months ago, I made it a goal to actually do a TED Talk, and I did one at UTD just a few months ago. Now I want to do an Ironman, so I'm going to do a full Ironman in a few months. I mean, everyone's busy, no one has time, but you really do make the time for things you really do care about. I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, if you don't have it, you can make the time. So whatever it may be, it might be a family, it might be outdoors, but that's it.
Yeah, so there's a saying, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person, right? So, I mean, I went through law school while I was working through the day, and I did a triathlon during law school, and I still to this day, I don't know how I did it. Prepping for that, I would say my passion, my hobby is writing, and especially since I've kind of started out doing fiction writing, and I've turned to kind of writing about my profession now. To me, since I've made that turn, writing almost every day, it's let me tell the stories about the things that I do, and I think that's really made a difference for me, being able to give back and being able to have an outlet creatively to do that.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So I'd just like to have an applause for our fantastic panel. There's a slight chance you might catch one of them with your last questions on the way out the door. I'll hand over to Clay. Let him.